All right, last time we talked about environmentalism. Let me just review quickly some of the stuff we talked about. And we were almost done, but not there, so then we'll tie it up. All right, we talked about the correct view of the environment as Christians. And we came up with 3 points there. God's in control, so this environment that wacko liberals are talking about, how we're going to destroy it. God's in control of it. We're not going to destroy it. Then we'll see that man is given dominion over the earth. The dominion mandate sometimes is referred to. The earth is given to us for our benefit. All right, I mean that literally. And then the third point was stewardship. We are to be caretakers of this. We shouldn't just rampantly destroy it, but if we're caretakers of that. So just like we're caretakers of money that God gives us, that doesn't mean we can't go spend it and dispose of it and use it, but we're stewards of that money, much the same way we are for the environment. All right, then we looked at what is the best way to make sure man fulfills his responsibility, his dominion mandate, and his stewardship of the earth. And what is the best way there? Should make somebody who skipped last class period start making wild guesses. Yeah, private property, that is the best way. Not the typical environmentalist of today. Their solution is always more government control, more rules, more laws, less private control of property. And really the best way to make sure this happens is private property. There are Christians, kind of like the Pope is a Christian, Christians, who argue in favor of all these government rules and regulations as part of our Christian responsibility as stewards and that type of thing. That is not the way to get it done. Pretty much if you ever get to the point where the best solution for your problem is the government, you're in bad shape. I mean, there are times where that's the solution, Japan bombs Pearl Harbor. You're in a bad problem if the government is the solution. And it is not the solution here. Private property. We did mention at the end of that there should be, and there are provisions, protecting your private property from other people. I can't just go destroy your car or your house or your bike or step on your Apple laptop, even though that might be what it deserves. There's an interesting situation with the iPhone, if you guys followed that. The one terrorist iPhone, the FBI can't get into it, which to me is kind of, that makes me want to get an Apple phone. They can't get into it, and they're demanding Apple give them a way into this phone. And Apple said, no, we're not going to do it. So we'll see. A court actually ruled that they had to, and Apple still said, no, we're not going to do it. So, but there are already rules against destroying people's private property. So rules that are kind of in this environmental realm for that purpose are perfectly fine and perfectly right. I can't set up on my property. I think we used to talk, Mr. Avocacy set up a gigantic gas tank on his property so he doesn't have to go to the gas stations, and the thing topples over and dumps gas all over my front yard. And he should be held responsible for that, not because he destroyed the environment, but because he destroyed my private property. All right, that should be the purpose of those things. So laws along that vein of large corporations and steel mills not polluting rivers and things like that. If the thought is we're damaging other people's private property, there's some honest need for that. But if the thought is we've got to protect the environment and it's global warming, that is not the vein to go in. So anyway, there is some room for that. Legitimate destruction of private property should be handled. And then the last thing we did was talk about 2 reasons why sometimes Christians are getting involved in this whole environmental craziness. So what are the 2 reasons? You guys are really awake. Oh, looked like you want to answer. You weren't even here, but...
They're Neos, I don't know.
They're Neos. Okay. Neo, enviro, tree hugger. Okay, it kind of goes together. Well, for time's sake. Oh, Megan.
Is it that they say it's for living universe?
Okay, loving your neighbors, that's one of them. And the other is our dominion. We're given dominion, we're given responsibility over the environment. So we need to embrace environmentalism and embrace all these regulations and rules for that. And then loving your neighbor, if you weren't here, and maybe even if you were here, that seems like a stretch, and it is. But the argument is, you would not want to live in an environment that was dirty with smog in the air and all kinds of stuff like that. So because you love your fellow mankind and fellow neighbors, you want to then make sure the environment is clean because you love your neighbors. So we should all drive smart cars. Go to dumb cars.
I heard they don't really get that good of gas mileage.
If you factor in everything, the generation of electricity, the batteries, the components for the batteries are mined out of the ground in very, very ecologically unfriendly manners. If you factor in everything, there's almost, by environmentalist standards, absolutely no benefit to a smart car. None. So I was going to say, Prague University has a little short 5-minute video about that. So, but anyway, loving your neighbor. Love your neighbor, and proper creation care is the phrase. I saw, you probably think all I do is watch stupid videos on the internet, but I can't remember where this was, but it was like a commercial for creation care, and it showed a scene twice. One time this guy's walking down the street, and I think he threw a piece of bubble gum or something away, and somehow pointed out how that's not caring for creation. He littered or something. And then they back it up, and this time it goes down the street, and he goes to throw the thing on the sidewalk, and he stops and puts it in a trash can, and all of a sudden the sun is brighter, and the cloud, and then at the end it goes creation care or something like that. It's their Christian mandate. Wow. Anyway, all that is it's beginning to, people are saying this is our duty as Christians to get involved in this, and that's really a bunch of garbage, no pun about cleaning up the environment. So, okay, next thing here, still, let's see, for me this is the fourth point, but next point, whatever it is for you, is that environmentalism, this whole idea of environmentalism and global warming or global climate change or whatever the current faddist term is fraud, all right? It's just fraud. That is the best way to describe it. I got a couple of points here to put down, but I'll give you the points. But we can't even really, if you look at it honestly, say it's bad science. It's not just that they made a mistake. It's straight fraud. It'd be like, I don't know, me going to, who should we pick on? Amanda, going through her high school grades and picking out the 50 lowest grades and averaging those and describing how stupid she is. Okay? You look at me and say, well, that's not fair. That would be bad. That's fraud is what that would be. And that's essentially what these climate scientists have done. They went around and picked the numbers that fit what they wanted, and then they published them. Even Al Gore's famous hockey stick graph, it's fraud. That's all they did. As much as it would be fraudulent for me to claim she failed high school based on those. Wait, maybe your lowest grades would be 90s. Maybe you wouldn't fail. I don't know. You want us to check? What's that? They're all thrown away. Even better. Then we could really fit in with environmentalism. We can make up the numbers. So it's just fraud. It really is. You hear all these numbers and stats. And last summer I flew out west and I was sitting at the airport waiting for my ride, drinking Starbucks, which I don't like Starbucks because of their politics, but it was the only place to get coffee. And CNN was on, so this was really painful. And it's this whole an hour-long show about the flowing things of ice, glaciers disappearing, and this one particular glacier, they got old people up there who lived in the area as kids and went to a certain point where you can't even see the glacier now, and they say, yeah, we used to play on the ice right here. And now because of global warming, it's way up there. And then they'd flip to some scientist talking these really serious tones about different things that cause it. But it's all fraud. okay? All fraud. They could have also gone other places and talked about glaciers that are, 4 miles further down the hill than they used to be. And people go up and stand on the ice and say, as kids, we used to play on snow or on the grass right here. It's just straight fraud, right? It's all it is, straight fraud. So I've got 3 points at least for you to write down beyond it being fraud. All right, the first is the fact that the earth is actually warming is based on very shaky science at best. Right? And at best. And that's given them the benefit of the doubt. We can say, well, maybe that's a little bit, didn't quite do your homework properly. The fact that the earth is actually warming is based on very shaky science at best. Imagine if we took Amanda's lowest 50 grades and then, as I say, take Megan's highest 50. Who would be better off? We took Megan's highest 50, and then we put a graph of their high school grades. We could look and say, look, Fairhaven Baptist Academy produces a superior product. Right? Look at these two sets of grades. Okay? And that really is the type of thing they've done. They'll cherry pick the answers they want for now, and they'll go back through history and cherry pick the things that they want that. They'll pick a really cool year to be the start of all of their calculations. And then of course you're going to, if you pick last winter as the average winter for us, then this way we've had like 20 degrees of global warming in 1 year. So that very, very shaky science is best. And really, if at best we can say you have very bad procedures. And I really think at the heart of it, it's just straight fraud. So there are emails between the scientists on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or whatever the thing is, talking about which numbers is going to throw out. We can't include those numbers in these. I mean, this is straight fraud. So it's shaky science at best. So that is very shaky. The second thing is the idea that this global warming was caused by people is also very, very unsettled. And so they really take two great assumptions that are based on nothing. The fact that there's all this climate change, and then that is caused by us. What's that? Well, I mean, not us in this room, all the people on the earth. So it is impossible. Again, you can look at volcanoes who spew out like 3 or 4 years worth of pollution that the entire earth, all the people on the earth produce, spewed out there in just a couple of days. And it's the very, very shaky ground that there's actually this global warming / climate change, and then even shakier ground that is caused by us. But then they go on and base all kinds of crazy rules. And I mean, even today in America, people are pushing for new rules to save the environment, new regulations, and tighter emissions on cars, and tighter emissions on power plants, and greater environmental controls on the steel mills up here. So anyway, very, very shaky ground. So, all right, the last point is that the modern environmental movement is really just a cover for government control. That is the end goal, increased government control. Going back into the early 90s, a group of socialists, liberals, those types who wanted government control increased. Really, they saw the possibilities here, and they latched onto it. And this is the vehicle they're riding to get government control. That was the point. The things that liberals always fight against, a free market, and the wealth that it produces, and people enjoying themselves and not being miserable and unhappy like they are. All the things that they've always hated have to go away to now solve global warming. It's the same types of things they've always pushed for. This is just a vehicle to try to give it some credibility and suck really unsuspecting people into it. So anyway, straight fraud. Well, that's the way to think of it. And I want to scream when even Republicans will get up and talk about climate change and that type of thing. And it is, every now and then somebody will get up and mention the fact that the earth has had the heating of the earth has plateaued and even gone down a little bit for about 12 years, or maybe 14 years now. I've lost track. Al Gore talking about. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy claims he made about 15 years ago about how the earth would be today. And they're all wrong. Wouldn't it be great to be that way? Be completely wrong on everything, but still be respected and looked at as credible? Some of you make that attempt on tests. So. All right, questions about environmentalism. I do have several examples here from blogs and different places of Christians talking about our duty to God. And I'm not going to bother reading through those. If you're willing to find them, it's not too hard to find, unfortunately. One of the headings was abuse of dominion. All right. So, all right. Next topic. I know I do want to try to finish this up today, and it scares me a little bit. I got kind of a clumsy title. It's welfare, Social Security, child advocacy, CPS, etc. There's a whole cluster of things. When we look into them, it really boils down to the same decision on every one of them. Welfare, Social Security, child advocacy, CPS, Child Protective Services, etc. Healthcare, talk about education. A whole cluster of things that really, thinking of them as Christians, it boils down to really the same set of things to think about. So I've got them all thrown in here together. So there's a little bit of background to get us thinking. These types of things make up the majority, and more than well over 50%, 65, 70% of the money spent by our government is spent on stuff like this: welfare payments, Social Security payments, child advocacy, child CPS, healthcare now, education. So we're talking about a major piece of the pie as far as expenditures go of our government. So, all right, all of these we're going to boil down to one basic decision, and you can probably already guess which decision we're going to go with, or God goes with, and it's not our decision. But I want to point out the decision up front, and then we'll take these individually and think about them a little bit. But the decision in all of these is something the government should do, or is it something that should be left to people individually? Right? Is the government responsible to provide for welfare, or is there some private entity or private people that are responsible? So the government or private entities of some kind. Who should be responsible for these things? If you don't take any other notes, just circle the people or private entities and draw a line all the way down the page. That's the answer to all of them. But I want to think about them a little bit. So, okay, questions about that? We'll look at several topics, but all of them really the thinking boils down to the same decision on all of them, and all of them. It's the private world that should have the responsibility and control. So, all right, the first one on my list is welfare. Welfare, and I have in parentheses beside it, in its many forms: food stamps, straight cash, school lunches, utility payments, rent payments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so just whatever fashion of money being given to people straight from the government. All right, let me get a couple people to read some verses for us, and then we'll draw some conclusions. Leviticus 23:22. Frank? Leviticus 19:9 and 10. Bethany? Deuteronomy 24:21. And I got one more marked here in this section. Megan? Leviticus 25:35 and 36. 25, 35, and 36. And I got some of the New Testament. Anybody want the easy ones? Sarah, Luke 3:11. Is that Amanda? James 1 through 3:19. I'm kidding. Matthew 19:21. I'm trying to give you a long passage. James 2:15 and 16. And 1 Timothy 5:8. Davey. If you didn't get picked here, well, maybe later you can read. So, all right. let's read these verses. We're thinking about welfare, all of this assistance and help given to people directly, and we can pull some basic principles out of this. All right, the first ones in the Old Testament deal with the gleaning system that God set up for the Jews. Leviticus 23:22, I think, was here.
And when you reap the harvest of your land, thou shalt not make a clean riddance of the corners of thy field when thou reapest, neither shalt thou gather any gleaning of thy harvest. Thou shalt leave them unto the poor and to the stranger. I am the Lord your God.
Okay, so there's provision made for the poor. All right, but can anybody think how that differs with America's welfare system? Should I start with who can think and then narrow it down to this particular topic? Yeah, they still had to go and pick it up. They didn't just sit at home and it didn't come in their check, didn't come in the mail, didn't show up in their bank account. All right. And is there a government bureaucracy that collects all of the gleanings? And no, it's a private person's responsibility to leave the gleanings, and they come and get it. There's very little government control. There's not a welfare department. All right, let's go on to Leviticus 19:9 and 10.
When you reap the harvest of your land, thou shalt not wholly reap the corners of thy field, neither shalt thou gather the gleanings of thy harvest. And thou shalt not glean the vineyard, neither shalt thou glean every grape of the vineyard. Thou shalt leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am the Lord your God.
Okay, so some of the thought they're extended out to also vineyards. You know what, Deuteronomy 24:21, as I'm looking at, is basically the same thing. Who got cheated on that one? Okay. Okay. So, sorry. We'll get you. Leviticus 25, that one. 35 to 36.
And if thy brother be waxen poor and fallen in decay with thee, then thou shalt relieve him, neither though he be a stranger or a sojourner, that he may live with thee. If thou knowest with him or increase, but fear thy God, that thy brother may live.
Okay, so here it doesn't talk about gleaning in particular, but it says if there's a fellow Jew that is waxen poor, it doesn't sound like it's fun, then you're supposed to help. You personally are responsible to help. It's not take them down to the township office so they can get signed up for their vouchers. You help, okay, and I think that's a significant part here. The responsibility is given to people individually to help other people individually. There's no indication here of setting up a government bureaucracy. It's you individually helping. So, all right, let's look in the New Testament, Luke 3:11. I don't remember who had it. Okay.
The answer is also to them, he that hath good coats, let him impart to him that hath none, and he that hath meat, let him do likewise.
Okay, similar thing there. If somebody needs something and you have it, you help, not a government bureaucracy. Leviticus 19:21. Matthew 19:21 in the New Testament.
Jesus said unto him, if thou wilt be perfect, go and sell that thou hast, and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasures in heaven, and come and follow me.
Okay, so again, give to the poor. You individually give to the poor. James 2:15 and 16.
If a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you say unto them, depart from me, be warmed and filled, notwithstanding you give them not those things which are needful to the body, what doth it profit?
This sounds like something that would happen in the guy's dorm. Some guy comes in and he's freezing because he doesn't have a coat, and Davey walks up and says, "Man, hope you get warm, brother." Pat him on the back. You walk off. The whole point is you should help them. Don't just tell them you feel bad for them. Help them. You personally help them. All right. 1 Timothy 5:8.
But if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel.
Okay, I put this one here to think about if there are some children or a wife or some family who's not getting taken care of. Who does God blame? Who's worse than an infidel? Are we all collectively? What's that? What's that?
The head of the home.
The head of the home, yeah. All right. That's who God blames. This is not. We do have, if they really are in that position, we should help. But God says that father there is worse than an infidel. All right. So the blame lies there. So, all right. Now here I've got 3 points for us to think about, just kind of pulling all this together. Probably these won't be shocking to you as we write them down. All right, first one. God told them to give privately, not publicly through government action. It was a private thing. it really is fun to think about people talk about government charity. That is, the two words don't go together. Charity is something you give voluntarily, but when the government comes literally by force and takes your money through taxes and gives it to other people, that's no longer charity. That you can call it theft, maybe, but charity doesn't fit. All right, so God told them to give publicly, not through government action. All those do is you individually responsible to help. All right, second thing is God also expected them to work. All right, it wasn't that they could just sit around and do nothing. They had to work. Some state, I'm in South Carolina, I didn't read the whole article. They just changed their welfare laws so that if you are a single guy that's able-bodied, you have to work in order to get your welfare payments. I have no idea that that brings up some questions about if you make money and those type of things, but work. And of course the liberals are all up in arms about this. But anyway, that's something God expects. Work. Even if you're poor, you're expected to work. Maybe especially if you're poor, you're expected to work. All right, and then the third one is the father is ultimately responsible to feed his family. Not the government, not society, not his neighbors. If there are some kids that starve to death, the blame lies there. Not that we wouldn't feel bad and think, man, I wish I would have helped, but God puts the blame there ultimately. Okay, before we leave welfare, I want to just mention one point here. It's not in this list of things, but just kind of a general point about charity, is that Christians are far more generous than non-Christians. Those of you that grew up candy selling here, do you love going to like Chinese neighborhoods? No. I mean, really, Christianity, a large component of Christianity is being charitable and helping others. It's our duty to God to help others, and that is true. America gives beyond what our government gives. These big hurricanes that come or tsunamis, the news reports all the money that our government gave. Often the money given privately surpasses that. I mean, Christians are very, very much more generous. Now these numbers are a little bit old. George Bush and John Kerry. Anybody know who is more wealthy? Neither one is poor. I thought you said it right.
George Bush.
Yeah, John Kerry. He married into the Teresa Heinz Kerry, the Heinz ketchup family, and very wealthy. Let me give you some tax return or some charitable donations from John Kerry. These are going back into the 90s, but 0, 2,039, 175, 820, 0. That was 5 years in a row. George Bush just have 3 years for 28,236, 31,914, 31,292. All right. So it's pretty good. What's that?
I need charity.
You need charity? Go talk to George Bush. Don't talk to John Kerry. He will talk about charity, but he's not going to do it himself. Right? All right. Really, Christians have a much better track record of giving money. All right, and the last thing with this welfare is a little bit of the difference between private charity and government charity. There's two very, very different things, and I've kind of already alluded to it, but I think it's worth making sure we have it. The difference between private charity and public charity or government charity, and I have charity in quotation marks with government. All right, first of all, it's voluntary. It's something you do voluntarily. You give money to the church voluntarily. You drop money into the plastic church out there voluntarily. Right? Second thing, it goes directly to the people in need, or at least much more directly to the people in need. You don't have this vast government bureaucracy that all the way along the line people are taking out their cut. Much more directly. Lots of times when you hear advertisements to donate to charities, they will talk about how much goes to the people. I mean, the ones that are very efficient they'll mention it. 93% of the money goes directly to the people. The 7% is used to cause the overhead or cover the overhead, but much more directly to the people. Third thing is it goes to people that are truly in need. Private charity. It goes to people that are truly in need, not just to people that can fill out forms properly and be qualified. You've probably all bumped into somebody who is perfectly physically sound and mentally sound, but they qualified for disability. Right? Any private charity that's giving that guy money is going to get cut off. They're going to say, this is a waste, go get a job. But the government, he qualified. Some government signed off on it, so he's qualified. He gets it. Right? So private charity, not that there can't be abuse there, but much more, it goes to people truly in need, not just to people that manage to get qualified somehow. All right, and then the fourth thing is private charity tends to bring people out of poverty. Public charity locks them into it. I mean, the government charity programs locks them into it. Can anybody think how that would, if you were the person receiving charity, how it would be different if one of your classmates came up and said, here, let me help you with your food this week, as opposed to you getting a check in the mail from the government to help you with your food this week? How would the one cause you to not especially be comfortable and try to improve yourself, and the other do the opposite?
Because you know that they have their own responsibility that they have to take care of, so you don't want to be taking their money.
Okay.
Whereas the government is just like,
That's just the government, just this nebulous pool of money that they've sucked out of the clouds and give to you. All right, it removes a lot of the stigma and it's people you know lots of times. Even here, the people that come in to get money or food at our food bank, they got to come in and talk to somebody. Right? That's, I don't know about you, but those of you that have sold candy, if you've ever done some type of fundraising, it's no fun to walk in and say, "Hey, want to give me some money?" There's some stigma with that. Anyway, private charity, it's not as comfortable. You're not going to just, Davey hands you $50 and say, all right, I'm set for life. And next week you just walk by with your hand out. It's not going to happen. At some point he's going to maybe give you $5 and keep walking, and it's going to be empty. All right, so private charity tends to push people out of it. All right, we got to keep going. Social Security. Social Security. By this I mean planning for retirement. That is what Social Security is. It's a retirement plan, at least officially, sort of, to provide money for you in retirement. All right, I don't have a whole list of verses here, but I think we can see these things pretty quickly. First of all, it's our responsibility, individually, to plan for the future. I know at some point in my life I'm going to be old, and you're probably thinking, you've arrived, Mr. Reinhardt. At some point, I'm going to be old, and we'll have to quit working as much or change what I do. I shouldn't plan on being able to continue to work until I drop. I'm here teaching one day, and I just don't wake up the next one. I shouldn't plan on that. At some point, I'm going to have to back off, and I should save for that. All right. So it's my responsibility. If I'm an old man eating cat food, I hope you feel sorry for him, but also help you say, Mr. Reinhardt, that was really stupid. Okay, you should have planned. All right, so it's our responsibility to plan for the future. It's yours. Second thing is the children also have responsibility to, as part of honoring their parents. We're told to honor and obey. You obey as children, but even as adults, you can honor your parents. Okay, so I think the children should bear some responsibility. My parents have set a very high standard that I hope I don't have to try to meet. They moved about 5 hours away to live near my grandparents. As my grandmother's now dead and my grandfather's 94, but they wanted to be there to help take care of them. And they really thought it was their responsibility as parents. I don't know. We'll see. But I should help. I should be willing to help them, all right, as their child. If you think of all the things your parents do for you, right? They spend the first 20 years of your life or so taking care of basically all of your needs. If you take care of them the last 20 years of their life, then maybe you broke even, right? So it shouldn't be unreasonable to expect that. So, and then the third thing with this is the church also has some responsibility. Church, there's instruction in the Bible about taking care of widows in need, true widows, and that type of thing. So, nowhere is the government the answer. Nowhere. All right, let's turn the page here. I'm going to skip over healthcare and come back to it at the end. That's the longest section, so if I have to weed something out, we can. Let's talk about child advocacy, child protective services. Yes?
I have a question.
Okay.
So if this is planning for retirement,
Like, so when I went to the ER and I asked for my social security number, why does that matter?
Went to,
Like,
oh,
why
it's
would I
just,
ask for-
it's used as a way to identify you now, that's all.
So I'm just a number.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, student 5-6. Really, it's just an identification. There are other Megan Braders in the world, and that number distinguishes you from them. Shocking, I know. We're sad about that too. I wish there was only one of you. So, all right, child advocacy, CPS, the idea of the government stepping in and taking children away, and the kids being able to call some government number and say, my parents are doing this to me, and that whole realm of things. So, all right, several points here. The first is the father is placed in charge of and responsible for the children. They're the ones, or he, and the parents collectively, they're the ones in charge. A lot of liberals and people who advocate this type of child advocacy, CPS stuff, they really come into it with the mindset that the government really is responsible. And as long as the parents abide by whatever the government thinks is good for the child, then they'll be allowed to keep them. And the thinking is the other way. The parents have responsibility. They have control. And the Bible, to an extreme, really very extreme position, gives the parents control over the children. All right, and nowhere the government. So a lot of modern thinking has it backwards. There's some very scary court cases and things like that where it's almost come out that the people in the government think that the children are theirs and will let the parents have them as long as they toe the line. So anyway, the Bible places the father and child. Wow, the father in charge. As a father, I do think that the Bible also has allowed children to be fathers, because I know it sounds crazy to you, but I feel like I'm a teenager that's been placed in charge of an academy and allowed to teach college students. This is, the kid being placed in charge of the candy store. I mean, that's what I feel like. So anyway, children also get to be parents. All right, the father's placed in charge. Second thing, the fathers are responsible to discipline and train their children. Fathers, parents collectively in charge of discipline and training their children. So education, that's the next topic, but think about education. Whose responsibility is it to make sure their children are educated? The father's responsibility. All right, it's not the government's responsibility. And really, if who should we pick on? Mary, since she talks so frequently. She gets married, has this brood of children, and she wants to put them in a certain school. It's her husband and hers decision. The government doesn't really biblically have the authority to come and say, well, that school, we're not sure about this or that. No, they're your children. You get to decide where they're educated. And we've really, like I said, the thinking is all twisted around. We're so much ingrained as a nation that the government is involved in education, and parents have to educate their children in ways that the government approves, and that type of thing. And really, that's not there biblically. The parents are placed in charge of discipline and in training their children. There's lots of verses here, but Galatians 4:1-2 talks about children being under tutors and governors until the father decides. It's making a different point. It's not talking about parents specifically, but it uses that to make the point until the father decides. Eli was reprimanded for not stopping his sons from sinning. Right? It wasn't this. They didn't go to the Better Government Bureau or the, Eli was responsible for not doing it. Sorry, the father is responsible for discipline and training his children. There's lots of verses in Proverbs and other places that talk about that. All right, the third point, and this might seem repetitious, but I think it's worth repeating, maybe in slightly different words. The father/parents can control their children's actions. Right? Parents have the ability, biblically, to say, no, my kid is not going to, and then fill in the blank. I don't think they should do that. I don't want them to go to the movies, or I don't want them to drive my car. I actually heard a case that preacher talked about years ago where the police told these parents that they could not tell their teenage kid, who's 15 or something, that they could not stop him from taking the car and driving illegally. And the parents said, you don't have the right to tell them that. the parents very justly said, well, then who's responsible if he gets in a wreck? And the same police said, you are. Which, if that makes sense to you, then move to Lithuania or something. But really, the thought is, in many people's mind, that the parents really can't tell their children, no, you can't do that. No, you're not going to drive. No, you're not going here. And the Bible says they do, to really some extreme cases. In Nehemiah 5, there's Nehemiah is reprimanding the Jews. And he brings up people that had sold their children to be servants. And the reprimand goes to the people that charged interest, that forced people to sell their children. If you think about where the reprimand was, it wasn't you wicked people that sold your children, it's you wicked people that charge interest. Right? It's, to an extreme extent here, the Bible places children under the control of their parents. So, all right. Fourth thing here with child advocacy. If children fail to obey the parents, it's the parents' responsibility to make sure they are punished. It's my responsibility to make sure my children are punished if they don't obey. It's not the village, as Hillary Clinton says, it takes a village. Or if you drive through the right streets in Michigan City, there's a daycare that's made it spiritual. They have paint on their fence. It takes a praying village to raise a child. I'm not sure they're praying to. But really, it's my job to train or to discipline them if they aren't obeying. It's not this collective thing of the whole human family or something like that. Me individually. So, all right, and then the last thing here is when should the government step in? I do think there is a point at which they should. When should the government step in? And I don't have a real good phrase for this, but at least it's satisfying for me. When should the government step in? I got two thoughts here. One, when there's some real crime taking place. The government's job is to punish evil. If I'm murdering my children, then the government needs to come in and stop that, just like if I was murdering anybody else. Right? All right, so there's a point there where the government should step in, and I have real crime in quotation marks. There's got to be something of that magnitude. And then the second thing is whatever the action is, there shouldn't undermine the authority of parents in general. Right? If Joy has her children strung up in the basement and is whipping them with like cats of nine tails and stuff, the government can come and haul her off to jail. But it shouldn't be something where everyone in the state then is in fear and trepidation that the government's going to take their children. All right, sure, punish the person who was committing this real crime, but don't undermine authority generally. And that's what we've done in our country. I mean, where kids are told if your parents speak harshly to you or they give you a spanking or they do this or that, just call us. And it has undermined that. And you were children, or you've probably been around people with children. At least one of those cases is true for you. And you've probably been aware of them being very careful in public, right? I heard somebody in church here talking about their code word for a spanking is a timeout. And they were in a store once, and they told their kid, "You're getting a timeout." And all of a sudden the kid started crying and sat down. It was very good. And the other parents were shocked. They said, "Wow, timeouts don't work for me like that does. What do you do?" But they didn't want to say you're getting a spanking when you get home because they were fearful of the government coming in. All right, and that's a sad thing, really. Okay, so child advocacy, CPS. Questions there? All right, next one is education. We can do this one very quickly. Really, it's an extension of the father being in charge of the children. It's part of the parent's responsibility. And then I have it's best done through private education, not public education. And I'm not just saying that because I'm the principal of a private school, but private education. Just like healthcare or any other segment of the economy, the private free market will provide a superior product. The same is true here. The public sector unions and the teachers' unions and all that scream and cry. If there is allowed to be a free market in education, it will change things for the better. I was talking to a lady from the Heritage Foundation once at a seminar about a year ago. And there's a couple of states that are toying with this a new idea that I really liked. They're going to take whatever money the government spends on education, and if you want to, you can take your kids out of the public school, and they'll set up an account and put that money in it. and you can spend it however you want to on education for your child. You'll have to, file paperwork to prove you're spending it on that, but however you want to. Send them to a private school, pay for the tuition there, get hire tutors to come to the house and teach them individually, however you want to. Right? Talk about revolutionizing education. I'd pull my kids out, if I was going. Chesterton gets almost $13,000 per kid. We would have, field trips to, when we're studying mountains, we'll go see McKinley and the moon. There we go. We'll go to the moon. It'd be great. So, but anyway, the private education is the best. What's that? A lot of shooting. You're right. Studying the physics involved. Yeah. Very important. All right. Let me make sure. We go till 45, right? 50? 9:45, 35, 9:50, 11? Yeah, all right. Let's do healthcare. We can get this in. All right. We get the same answer, or the same question with the same answer. Who's responsible for healthcare? Is it the government that's responsible for providing us healthcare, or are we individually responsible? Joy's saying, I can't tell, her head's leaning sideways and she's nodding. So which is it? The second one. It's an individual responsibility. Right? It's not a right, as came up during the debates over Obamacare. It's not a right. It is a responsibility that we have individually. Okay, so we get the same answer. It's an individual right. So a couple of things here about this beyond that general statement is sometimes universal health care is presented as our Christian duty to our fellow man. I have actually, would you want to be without health care? So the answer is we need a government-instituted health care program. That is no. The answer is no, I don't want to be without health care. And if you see somebody really needs help, who's responsible to help them? Is it the government's responsibility? No, it's my responsibility. You should be willing to help them. So there are Christians that talk about that. During the Obamacare debates and all that, we went to a rally in Valpo, and some of you might have been down there that grew up here. Did you go down to that rally? Do you remember the crazies across the street? They were chanting, Jesus healed the sick for free. Jesus healed the sick for free. Bunch of long-haired, hippie, crazy people over there arguing that it's making the point that as Christians we should be for this universal health care because Jesus also healed the sick for free. Can anybody think of any fallacies in that?
I was just going to say, doesn't he still heal the sick for free?
Yeah, you're right. Even in a free market system. Okay. Anything else?
It's not really free coming from our money?
Yes. I know health care today is not free. Someone's paying for it. Right? Jesus was God. He didn't have to pay for it. So anyway, it's part of our, Christians say it's part of our Christian duty. That same thing about loving your mankind to keep a clean environment, loving mankind to provide universal health care. No, that's not the answer. We should love fellow men and want to make sure they're healthy and live in a clean environment, but the government is not the answer. So it's not our Christian duty, at least, to have a universal health care program. Second thing is this falls under the responsibility of the father, or at least the family. Okay, and here sometimes it's been brought up that the best way for me, as the head of my house, to provide health care for my family is to help the government organize a universal health care system that I can pay my taxes to, and then it provides coverage for my family. Okay? And the answer still is no, that is not the best way for me to provide for my family. All right? The answer is still a free market system where I go out and buy it. That's the best way to do it. So even if, some people say that it's part of your duty as a father to provide health care for your family, and this Obamacare, or whatever you want to call it, is going to provide that, and you should embrace it as the duty to your children. No, all right? The best way is still the free market. It will provide a better product. Anybody get your eyes lasered in here, the LASIK surgery? Nobody? Okay. It used to be $5,000 or $6,000 an eye, and I think it's down to under $2,000 an eye now. Okay? And a big reason is there's very, very little government control. It's typically not covered by insurance. People are just paying for it straight out of pocket. And the free market has driven the price of that down. Imagine if we had the same thing for MRIs and getting casts on and just everything else. The free market would drive the price of those things down. So even if you hate doctors, the free market is the answer, because then you get to stick it to the doctor. If they overcharge you, you go to another doctor. That's vengeance on the doctor. So, all right, so it's the father's responsibility, and the best way for me to handle that is not through the government. It's still me privately through the free market. All right, the last thing with this, and hopefully we can get this part in, is what's wrong with America's healthcare system? I mean, we have this big debate about, this horrible problem, and now suppose we have the solution. It'd be like having a splinter in your thumb, and the solution is to put your whole hand in a press and flatten it out. You're not too worried about the splinter anymore, right? That's Obamacare. So. All right, let me mention a couple of things that are really not the problem, that are often blamed. Often insurance companies are blamed. Still today, they'll talk about insurance premiums going up. We talked the other day about being forced to cover pre-existing conditions, and that ruling. It doesn't make any sense. But they are not at fault. They are in business to make money. And if they're going to be forced to cover all kinds of extra things by the government, then they are going to then have to charge more for it. It's not because they're evil. It's because they want to make money. If you think that they're evil for trying to make money, then you should probably go to your boss and apologize for asking for a paycheck. Really. And say, I'm just here to serve mankind. Right. If that really is your view of life, I have a lawn and some other things. I have some wood that needs split. I'll let you serve mankind. Okay. Another point here about America's system. Often people blame doctors or hospitals and say they're overcharging. Again, you can find doctors who are fraudulent, but that is not the problem. Doctors and hospitals overcharging. Right? Doctors have a very specialized talent, and we try to punish them for trying to exercise that talent. I mean, they are facing crazy lawsuits for all kinds of things. Every time they do a surgery or see a patient, if anything goes wrong, typically that patient's going to sue them, all right? And they have massive expense having this, just lost the name for it, malpractice insurance. All right, so they have major expenses. So anyway, the answer, they're not the problem, okay? And that often is the point. All right, now the problem is, can anybody guess? One word. The government. The problem is the government. And I'll give you a couple of ways that they have created this problem. Just two ways. And there are other, I'm going to try to not talk about Obamacare and how it's aggravated the problem. Just two problems. One is we've set up a system where the person receiving the service isn't paying for the service. Right? I have insurance provided for me through my employer. I don't pay for it. I don't study the premium and make sure that I'm not getting gouged. I'm not paying for it. Okay? That's human nature. If you're told, last night, Paul Payton was telling me he was going through the drive-through at Dairy Queen, and somebody from church pulled up behind him, and he told the teller that I'm going to pay for them. All right, very nice thing to do. Well, that guy, when he saw him at church the next time, joked around with him and said, "Hey, if you'd have told me you were paying, I would have got more." Because there was a disconnect. The person receiving the service wasn't paying. All right, and that is there's lots of ways our government has done that, but we don't have that connection anymore. You go to the doctor, you show them an insurance card, you do this or that, the paperwork goes off to the insurance company, they pay. At some point you might get a bill for the balance, but you're not there paying. You go to McDonald's, they want cash or a credit card, they want money right then. You're paying for it directly. And our healthcare system is not that way. I've heard stories of people that went in for some medical procedure and they wanted to pay for it. And the clerks and all that kind of stuff, really, they had to kind of rethink, you want to pay, right? You just want to pay. And how much is it? And they said, well, we don't know. Imagine walking in to the hospital, and there's a sign up there, compound fracture, $500. You walk into an auto repair store, list of prices. You walk into Walmart's eye clinic, there's a list of prices. All right, those places you're paying. Right? In the medical world, we're not paying directly. All right, and that disconnect, it removes the free market pressures on prices and as well as quality. They're both gone. So that is one problem. Our government has set that up, and there's multiple ways that they have done that, but that's one problem. The second thing to mention about how our government has created this problem is the government has all kinds of rules and regulations that make it extremely expensive. Extremely expensive. Insurance, health coverage, the whole package, extremely expensive. Things like the medical malpractice, being forced to cover now pre-existing conditions. You break your leg, go sign up for health insurance, and they have to pay for your broken leg to get fixed. Craziness. Hospitals being forced to provide a service and then afterwards figure out if you can pay. I like that at Midwest Gun Exchange or something. I get to walk out with the gun, and after I'm gone off the property, then we figure out if I have to pay. You go to the emergency room. They're required to treat you, and after it's all done, then we decide if you have to pay. All right, things like that I'm not saying that as a Christian, it's our duty to help people, but the government is forcing them to. We're not allowed to buy insurance across state lines. Right? We have to buy insurance from a company inside Indiana if you live here. Imagine if the government imposed that rule on Amazon. You can only sell, it doesn't make any sense. But the government has imposed just layer after layer of these type of rules that make it extremely expensive. Right? And then those same people that impose all those types of rules come back and say, because the free market created such a mess, we need Obamacare. And really, the right way to say it is because the government created such a mess. The solution is let's give the government more power, and it really doesn't make any sense. The answer is a free market system. That'll fix it. Okay, health insurance, health care. Questions there?